The sleek ambiance of the luxury restaurant buzzed with soft conversations and the gentle clinking of glasses, a haven for the city's elite. A man in a well-worn leather jacket stepped through the grand entrance. His face was familiar, perhaps too familiar. His modest attire and unassuming demeanor seemed out of place among the tailored suits and glittering jewelry. The maitre d' hesitated, but before he could speak, the man quietly gestured toward a small table by the window. Reluctantly, he was seated, though the sharp glance exchanged between staff spoke volumes. Minutes later, a waiter approached, menu in hand, his expression barely concealing disdain. "Sir," the waiter began, his tone clipped, "this isn't the kind of place for casual diners. Our prices aren't exactly—" His eyes flicked over the man's jacket. Friendly, the man smiled, unbothered by the jab, and asked for a simple glass of water to start. The waiter raised an eyebrow. "That's complimentary, you know. You don't need to tip for it." A chuckle rippled through the nearby tables, the quiet humiliation feeding the room's sense of superiority. As the man sipped his water, he quietly observed the restaurant. The laughter of a couple enjoying their evening, the glow of candlelight reflecting off fine crystal, the staff moving with precision. He seemed at ease. Yet the waiter's dismissive attitude persisted. When he returned to take the order, he leaned in and whispered, "We do have a dress code here. I'm surprised they let you in." The man set down his glass and looked up, his eyes calm but piercing. "I'll have the chef's special, thank you," he replied simply. The waiter sighed audibly, scribbled the order, and walked off muttering something under his breath about tourists. The night wore on, and the staff continued to eye the man as though he were an unwelcome guest at a private event. But their smirks faded when the restaurant's general manager walked in. His eyes scanned the room before locking onto the man by the window. In an instant, his professional mask melted into something approaching panic. He hurried over, weaving. "Through the tables, Mr. Reeves," the manager said, his voice trembling with respect. "It's an honor to have you here. I wasn't aware you'd be visiting tonight." The room fell silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as diners turned to watch. The waiter, now frozen near the bar, paled visibly. Keanu Reeves smiled gently, gesturing for the manager to lower his voice. "I didn't want to make a scene," he said. "I just wanted to enjoy the atmosphere." The manager nodded furiously, his demeanor a stark contrast to the earlier treatment. "Of course, sir. Is there anything we can do to make your evening more comfortable?" Keanu's gaze drifted to the waiter, who was now trying to blend into the shadows. "Actually," he said, his tone measured, "I'd like to meet the chef. I've heard wonderful things." The manager rushed to fetch the chef while Keanu stood and walked toward the waiter. The room remained silent, tension thick in the air. "I understand not everyone recognizes me," Keanu began softly, his words carrying across the hushed restaurant. "But it's important to treat everyone with kindness. You never know who's walking through your doors, or what they might be dealing with." The waiter stammered an apology, his bravado entirely dissolved. Keanu smiled again, patting the man on the shoulder before returning to his table. Moments later, the chef emerged, and the two shared a warm conversation that carried none of the tension from earlier. As the night drew to a close, Keanu left a generous tip for the staff and quietly exited, leaving the restaurant in a state of reflective silence. The next day, the staff learned the truth. Keanu Reeves wasn't just a guest. He was the silent owner of the restaurant, a passion project he'd invested in to create a space where people could enjoy good food and good company, no matter their background. The lesson lingered far longer than the evening's embarrassment, a reminder that kindness costs nothing but means everything. The revelation sent shockwaves through the staff. Whispers of the previous night's events spread like wildfire, and the waiter who had insulted Keanu Reeves found himself at the center of uncomfortable attention. He avoided eye contact with his colleagues and replayed the encounter in his mind, regret mounting with each passing moment. What had started as an attempt to appear sharp and elitist now felt hollow and shameful. The general manager, deeply embarrassed by the incident, called an emergency staff meeting the following morning. He stood before the team, his expression stern but reflective. "Last night," he began, "we failed to uphold the values this restaurant was built on. It's not just about fine dining or luxury. It's about hospitality, respect, and making every guest feel welcome." His words cut through the room like a knife. "It shouldn't take a celebrity to remind us of this," he continued. "We treat every guest with dignity, no matter what they look like or what we assume about them. Let's not forget this is his restaurant. It exists because of his vision." The waiter stepped forward, visibly shaken. "I need to apologize," he said, voice trembling. "Not just to Mr. Reeves, but to all of you. I acted out of arrogance, and I let my assumptions guide me instead of doing my job with integrity. I've learned my lesson, and I'll make sure it never happens again." The manager nodded, though his expression remained firm. "An apology is a start, but actions speak louder. Let this be a turning point for all of us." Meanwhile, Keanu Reeves carried on as he always did, with humility. When he visited the restaurant again a few weeks later, it was without any entourage or fanfare. This time, the staff greeted him with genuine warmth, and the atmosphere was noticeably lighter. The waiter who had insulted him approached nervously, unsure of how he'd be received. To his surprise, Keanu extended his hand with a kind smile. "All make mistakes," Keanu said simply. "It's how we grow from them that matters." From that day on, the restaurant truly transformed. The staff embraced a renewed sense of purpose, creating a space that radiated not just luxury, but genuine hospitality. Patrons noticed the change, and word spread about not just the food, but the extraordinary kindness that defined the experience. Keanu's quiet act of grace became the story behind the restaurant's growing reputation, and though he never sought credit for it, his philosophy of kindness remained its true foundation. A reminder to all who worked and dined there that respect and humility are the finest ingredients of all. Over time, the restaurant became more than just a luxurious dining spot. It became a symbol of warmth and inclusivity. Regular patrons often shared stories of how the staff went out of their way to make everyone feel special, regardless of their background. Guests who had previously felt intimidated by the opulent ambiance now found themselves returning, drawn by the genuine care that permeated every interaction. Keanu's visits became a quiet but frequent occurrence. He never announced himself, nor did he demand special treatment. Instead, he often sat in the same corner table by the window, observing the place he'd helped create. Sometimes he'd chat with the staff, offering words of encouragement or asking for suggestions on how to make the experience even better. His humility and involvement inspired the entire team, reminding them that no task was too small to approach with care. One evening, a young couple entered the restaurant, clearly out of their depth. The man fumbled with the menu, his eyes widening at the prices while his partner tried to hide her discomfort. It didn't take long for one of the servers to notice. Unlike the judgmental glances of the past, the staff now approached such moments with empathy. Keanu, seated nearby, noticed the couple as well. Quietly, he called over the manager and spoke a few words before returning to his meal. Moments later, the manager approached the couple with a warm smile. "This evening's dinner is on the house," he said. "And if you'd like, our chef would love to recommend a few specialties for you." The couple was overwhelmed, their gratitude evident in their tearful smiles. They didn't realize that the man who had orchestrated this act of kindness was seated just a few tables away, blending in like any other diner. Stories like these became the norm, not the exception. Keanu's philosophy of leading by example had not only changed the culture of the restaurant, but had also inspired the staff to embrace the same values in their own lives. The once intimidating luxury establishment now had a reputation for being welcoming and unpretentious, a rarity in the world of fine dining. One day, as Keanu prepared to leave after another quiet visit, the same waiter who had once insulted him approached. Though he had grown immensely since that fateful night, the man still carried a lingering guilt. "Mr. Reeves," he said, his voice steady but heartfelt, "I'll never forget how you treated me that night. You could have embarrassed me or had me fired, but instead, you taught me a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my life. Thank you." Keanu placed a hand on the man's shoulder and gave him a reassuring smile. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Just pay it forward. The world could always use a little more kindness." The waiter nodded, feeling a sense of closure he hadn't expected. As Keanu walked out the door, the staff and diners alike watched him go, not as a celebrity but as someone who had quietly, humbly, and profoundly changed their lives. And though the city was filled with countless restaurants, none could match the magic of this one, a place where every table held not just great food but the simple, enduring power of respect and humanity. As the years went by, the restaurant became a cultural landmark in the city. It wasn't just a destination for exquisite food. It was a place with a story, one that people wanted to be a part of. Guests often shared their own tales of visiting, whether it was a first date, a family celebration, or an ordinary evening that turned extraordinary because of the staff's attentiveness. The restaurant even began to host special community nights where meals were offered at a reduced cost, ensuring that people from all walks of life could enjoy the space. Keanu's quiet influence was evident in every detail. He often insisted these nights remain low-key, free of cameras or fanfare. For him, it wasn't about publicity. It was about giving back. One evening, a single mother arrived with her 2 children, clearly nervous about bringing them into such a high-end establishment. The staff greeted them warmly, guiding the little ones to their seats and providing them with crayons and paper to keep them entertained. By the end of the meal, the mother was in tears, not because of the food, though it was exceptional, but because of how comfortable and valued she and her children had been made to feel. Keanu happened to be present that night, sitting at his usual corner table. He watched the scene unfold with a soft smile, content in knowing the restaurant was living up to its purpose. He didn't approach the family. He didn't need to. The experience spoke for itself. One of the chefs, inspired by Keanu's vision, began mentoring young culinary students from underprivileged backgrounds, offering them internships and opportunities to grow their skills in a professional kitchen. The ripple effects of Keanu's ethos of kindness extended far beyond the walls of the restaurant, touching lives in ways even he might not have fully realized. As the restaurant's reputation grew, journalists and bloggers began digging into its origins. They pieced together the story of its silent owner and his humble approach to leadership. Though Keanu avoided interviews about it, the narrative took on a life of its own. Articles praised not just the food but the culture, often concluding with a variation of the same thought. In a world so focused on exclusivity and appearances, this restaurant stood as a reminder that kindness and humility are the ultimate luxuries. 1. Night. A reporter managed to catch Keanu as he was leaving the restaurant. "Mr. Reeves," she began, holding out a microphone, "your restaurant has inspired so many people. Do you have any words for those who look up to you?" Keanu paused, his signature understated smile appearing. "It's not about looking up to anyone," he said softly. "It's about looking around, seeing people, really seeing them. Everyone has a story. Everyone deserves kindness. That's all." And with that, he disappeared into the night, leaving behind not just a restaurant, but a legacy. It was a legacy that whispered rather than shouted, one that wasn't about glamour or fame, but about the simple, powerful truth that treating others with dignity could change the world. One meal, one moment, one act of kindness at a time. Years later, the restaurant became a beacon of hope and change in the city. Visitors came not just for the exquisite food or the chance to brush shoulders with its humble owner, but to experience the essence of what it represented. Stories about the restaurant's kindness continued to spread, creating a community of people who valued humanity over status. The staff, once a mix of skeptics and perfectionists, had grown into a family. Each person, from the dishwashers to the head chef, carried Keanu's message forward. They ensured that every guest, whether they were a billionaire or a struggling artist, left feeling cared for. The culture of kindness had become second nature. It was no longer just a practice but a defining trait of the restaurant's identity. One evening, during an especially busy night, The restaurant hosted a charity dinner to support homeless shelters across the city. Keanu, as usual, kept a low profile, helping coordinate the event from the sidelines. His silent contributions went beyond financial support. He was often seen rolling up his sleeves to serve meals at local shelters or personally delivering surplus food from the restaurant to those in need. As the charity dinner reached its peak, a young woman approached Keanu. She was a former culinary student who had once been mentored at the restaurant. With teary eyes, she shared her story of how the opportunity had changed her life. "I didn't think I belonged in this industry," she said. "I thought people like me, someone who couldn't afford fancy schools, would never make it. But because of you, I'm now a sous chef at one of the best restaurants in the country. Thank you." Keanu shook his head humbly. "You're the one who put in the work. All we did was give you a chance. You earned your place." The woman smiled, but her gratitude was unwavering. "You gave me hope. That's worth more than anything." The night ended with record-breaking donations and countless smiles. As guests filed out, many lingered, soaking in the atmosphere of a place that felt more like home than a luxury establishment. In the years that followed, the restaurant's influence extended far beyond the city. Other businesses took note of its model, luxury blended with humility, and began implementing similar practices. The idea that kindness could coexist with success spread like wildfire, changing the culture of hospitality for the better. Keanu continued to live his life with the same quiet grace, rarely acknowledging the impact he had made. To him, the restaurant wasn't about accolades or fame. It was about creating a space where people could come together, connect, and leave a little better than they came. Eventually, the restaurant became more than just a physical place. Its story inspired books, documentaries, and even other restaurateurs across the globe who wanted to replicate its philosophy. Yet through all the attention, Keanu's message remained simple and clear. Kindness is the most valuable thing you can serve. And so, the legacy of the restaurant carried on, growing in ways no one could have imagined. It became a living reminder of what one small act of humanity could spark, a movement that transcended tables and menus, leaving an indelible mark on everyone who walked through its doors.